I'm focused on his spirit cause it keeps me from his fire. The Holy Ghost is with me, so my fear I leave behind. My sins were all diminished when he took that breath and died. And if you think I'ma give up on my God, the devil is a lie. The devil is a lie. The devil is a lie.
Hello. Welcome to Black Teen News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about the Supreme Court hearing some arguments about girls' sports and who gets to participate in them. And it's kind of funny on this big of a scale. Basically, they're discussing the question, what is a woman? And so I just keep hearing some of these snippets from the arguments and just keep seeing Matt Walsh's face, just deadpan asking experts like, yeah, but what is that? What is a woman? And the trans issue, it's it's so weird seeing people stress and stretch themselves to try to make sense of a man claiming to be a woman and trying to make the case that it's fair that they have access to all the spaces and activities that women can do, their dorm rooms, their bathrooms, their locker rooms, and their sports teams, when these places are segregated by sex, which the etymology of the word, you know, when you're talking about gender and stuff, it's just been like a different word for sex, and we just people are trying to revamp it and understand it to be some kind of, I don't know, pseudoscience or something of your inner self. And what if you don't accept that you have some kind of, gender identity, that I'm just a woman. I'm not a cis woman because I don't identify as a woman. That's just what I am. So, but they say that's bigoted or whatever and hateful, and that you're ignoring people or denying their existence and yada, yada, yada. It's such a silly ideology. And it's really strange that we have to take this all the way up to the Supreme Court just to get fairness and justice for women. But here we are. Scott Adams also passed away. And there's some rough headlines about him. We talked about him last week and some things that he said about Christianity. And so he did write something in his final message about it. And suppose it's between him and God about where his heart was in his last moments. But we'll talk about his final message. But the media is talking about in the headlines about him, about how he's disgraced and people are remembering him as a racist. And so I kind of want to revisit the thing that got him canceled some time ago, and had where people were like pulling Dilbert and stuff from the show. That people didn't want to represent him and all that stuff because of some comments he made about a survey of people saying that they didn't think it was okay to be white. And so I had wrote about it at the time, so I'm going to revisit an article that I wrote and just kind of remind folks what happened back then, because I really don't think it's fair to look at this whole man's life and be like, well, he was a terrible disgraced racist, and that's how we're going to remember him after he died of cancer. Especially knowing how some of the media treats, I don't know, terrorists and dictators when they die. So they have nicer words for people who I don't know, said Trump was going to win in 2016. He ended up being right, did he not? So anyway, before we jump into it, I want to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation on the site, because it does cost a stream on my site, all that stuff. You guys can support. I very much appreciate it and appreciate you guys. You guys can also check out different merch that's available on the website, of mugs and t-shirts and all sorts of different things. So go ahead and check that stuff out. We got some of our Club XX shirts and stuff that you guys can check out on the site. But yeah, go ahead and check that out. Also, I have different books you guys can check out. There's a link in the description. It'll take you to my book website where you guys can check out Bigger. You guys can check out other stuff as well. But most of my books are available on Kindle Unlimited. If you do have Amazon, The only one that's not is I think maybe my nonfiction may not be available for Kindle Unlimited. I'm not sure about yeah, I don't think Of Course God is Blatantly Against Abortion is available for that. You'll have to actually buy it. But it's available and you guys can pick those up. So see if there's any other announcements. I don't think so. So there is a chance I have there's a lot of stuff going on tomorrow, like just kind of personally and family stuff going on. So I think I'll be fine to stream tomorrow, but things will be a little hectic. So I just want to pre-warn in case I have to move things around tomorrow. Just a little FYI. So my sister has like a art craft show thing going on, and I just need to coordinate some different things. So it's not, nobody's sick, nobody's dying, nothing like that. But there just might need to, there's just like different ways that family needs to help each other out. So I just need to have the flexibility to do that a little bit tomorrow. So I just want to throw a heads up out there. Thank you to those of you who are watching live, to those of you who are on Facebook, those of you on YouTube watching. I know you guys can't all interact with each other, but I do see your comments. I do see you coming in and liking. Thank you to those of you who watch back later. I see, different comments and stuff pour in later. All that stuff does help. So whatever time you watch, I do very much appreciate it. Appreciate you guys. I know YouTube and Facebook don't allow notifications or whatever to go through, but I thank you guys for showing up. Someone said, can you post a list of books you recommend on your timeline? Is that like books that I recommend you read my books, but is that just like a recommendation list for like fiction or nonfiction books in general? Like my master list of books to check out? Is that the question? Cassie's asking that. Any books. Sure. I can I can do that. I don't have as much time to read as I would like, but there's definitely some books that I've talked about that I really liked. Like I've talked about Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus was really good. Is God a Moral Monster was really good. I'll have to read it. Is God a Vindictive Bully next. I've also I don't have enough faith to be an atheist was pretty good. Most of them are going to be faith books, but yeah. Well, Cassie, look, it's already saying she's already read these books I'm recommending. But yeah, sure. I'm thinking that there's Color, Common Sense, and Communism is an interesting book, for sure. I think I'll probably just try to go through more books this year and kind of review them. I'm been going through, I haven't finished it, General Grant's autobiography. It's quite long. But very interesting. Yeah, so yeah, I can try to pull up something. Anyway, thank you for your interest. Thank you for your interest indeed. So let's talk about Scott first. And then we can get to the Supreme Court stuff. So Scott Adams, if you follow him at all, or you're kind of involved in the online MAGA space, you probably know that he has been sick for some time and struggling with his illness. So he has passed away. And so he's continued, doing like periscopes or lives and stuff. Basically up until the end, he left a message for someone to post that was posted after he had died. And we talked about him last week because not this past Sunday, but I think the Sunday before it, there was a video that was going viral of Scott. People were saying that Scott was a Christian or was converting or had converted, and he was a brother in Christ. And I took issue with his outlook on Christianity because what he was describing was just inaccurate. And so I'm like, okay, I think all these people should try to explain to Scott, or someone with a platform or ability to reach him should just explain the gospel clearly, because what he's describing is just a total inaccurate description about what it means to be saved, or what Christians actually believe. You don't get into heaven because you're a good person. It's just not how it works. And people took issue with me. They're like, why are you being so judgmental? I'm like, I care about this man's soul. And I care about accurate representations of Christianity. This isn't like a small thing to dispute. This is like the whole crux of the situation. So he did pass away. And he did he got frustrated by people reaching out or trying to correct him, which I didn't think was a great sign, but still obligation to do that. But he did address it in his letter, his final letter. But what I suppose I really wanted to talk about were these headlines about Scott. And there was, I think people deleted their tweet about it, but I don't think they deleted their article about it. And this was one of their headlines about Scott Adams. Scott Adams, disgraced Dilbert creator, dies at 68. Dilbert was pulled from wide circulation after Adams' racist rant in 2023. So this man died, and he made a cultural icon, and that's how they chose to recognize that this man had passed, by just reminding everybody, like, hey, this man was racist. In case you ever thought about mourning him, just a reminder, he's a racist. And I think that's really messed up, especially knowing other headlines for dictators or terrorists have been kinder than this. There was also the Boston Globe. Scott Adams, Dilbert creator who veered into racist far-right commentary, dies. And that's how they are choosing to remember this man who died. And a lot of people know him online and been following him for a while. A lot of people have liked his Dilbert, of course, have liked his other books that he wrote. And he has a real family, so it's just really crazy that that's how people respond to stuff like this. So I want to remind people what the controversy was actually about. Now, people, beyond the controversy, the thing that got him canceled, that people were calling him racist over, they were angry about like some of his right wing commentary. I listened to Scott a lot, not in the past year or so, but I thought like his prediction about Donald Trump winning the 2016 election was fascinating. And his ideology was basically, this man is stacked as far as his talent with persuasion, And he said he was a trained hypnotist or whatever, and that uh he just recognized how you can persuade people, and Trump just had a natural charisma about him, and just he was going to destroy everybody basically on the debate stage, and we know the rest is history. Did he not win in 2016? So his predictions were pretty interesting. So people kept watching Scott as he was just kind of observing the world and looking around at the world or whatever. And he was one of the people who sounded the alarm about the Very Fine People hoax and really worked to debunk it, because after Charlottesville, it seemed like a lot of people were just embarrassed by Trump and really upset and didn't even want to analyze what he said at the time. And I remember Scott Adams just posting the transcript, and just something like posting the transcript was enough to start unwinding a lot of people. And it took some years for the mainstream media to admit, like, yeah, what people were saying is fake, that he actually did condemn the neo-Nazis. It took years for the media to really catch up with the truth. So I appreciated Scott doing that. But he had interesting commentary. I obviously didn't always agree with Scott Adams. But he did have fascinating commentary. Now, something that he said that was really controversial was some comments after there was, I think it was Pew Research. So we're going to go down memory lane a bit and revisit this article I wrote some time ago. And I phrased it like, plot twist, Dilbert creator Scott Adams canceled for being a poster child for critical race theory. So Dilbert has been officially canceled after the controversial video of Scott Adams circulated the internet. The fate of the iconic comic strip was inevitable. But not only has Dilbert been dropped from major publications, even Adams' non-Dilbert upcoming book has been canceled, and the entire backlist, according to Scott Adams. The book agent canceled me too. And what sort of horrible ideology did Scott spread to garner such a backlash? What sort of horrid hate speech did he espouse? Critical race theory. Of course, he didn't call it that, but its tenets were easily recognizable. The controversy began after Rasmussen released a poll stating that 72% of Americans agree it's okay to be white. Honestly, with so much racial tension, much of it manufactured, I was a bit relieved to see the majority of the nation hadn't totally lost their minds. But an unusual amount of Americans answered not sure. I'll chalk this up to moral cowardice rather than simply being immoral racist, though both are awful options. So that was the it's okay to be white. 72% of Americans agree, 12% disagree, 69% of Democrats agree, 12% disagree. And when it came to black people, can be racist too. 79% of Americans agree, 12% disagree, 71% of Democrats agree, 19% disagree. And so, and people were even mad that they asked that question, but you should be able to say of course it's okay to be white. Like could you help that? Like what even, it's a silly question, but I think it's even sillier that some people said no and some people said they're not sure. So I guess we found out something interesting about society at the time. In Adams' video, he marveled at 26% of Black Americans disagreeing and 21 stating that they're not sure if being white is okay. And he said if nearly half of all Blacks are not okay with white people, that's a hate group, Adams said. He also lamented that our current racial relations couldn't be fixed and white people were best simply getting away from Black people. The reason is, why would you want to be around people who don't like you? Adams also upset Black users on Twitter by stating he had helped Black people in the past, but there was no point if they would still hate white people. Critical race theory has a few tenets. The first tenet is that racism is ordinary, not rare. It's the way we operate and do business. Therefore, treating everyone the same across the board can thus remedy only the most blatant forms of discrimination, according to critical race theory and introduction. That is why the Democrat Party platform believes race neutral policies are not sufficient to to rectify race-based disparities. That's why they push for equity over equal opportunity. The second tenet of critical race theory is interest convergence. Authors Richard Delgado and Jean Stefanchik explain because racism advances the interest of white elites materially and working class people uh, that's not psychologically, but large segments of society have incentive to eradicate it. They explain even if white people try to end something racist, they may be more from self-interest of elite whites than a desire to help blacks. Critical let me I'm I don't know why I make this so light on my thing. Okay. Critical race theory has a few. Oh, hold on. I lost my place. Okay, they try to explain that even if white people try to end something racist, it may be more from a self interest of elite whites than a desire to help blacks. Critical race theory teaches that white people are racist. They don't have an incentive to not be racist. And when they do something that's the opposite of racist, they're still racist. But their selfishness is more important than their racism. I don't believe Scott Adams necessarily agrees with critical race theory's tenets, but he is responding to the reality of its conclusions and impact. If Scott Adams said, if what Scott Adams said was evil and worthy enough for him to be canceled, then the same people who canceled him should do everything within their power to cancel critical race theory from every form of our lives, from schools to entertainment. Now, people are starting to kind of try to limit critical race theory, at least how they don't want to call it that because they know it's got a lot of bad connotations with it. And then they started just kind of calling stuff DEI, but now they don't even want to call it DEI because it has a negative connotation to it. There's some people still fighting for DEI, but they're trying to kind of call it something else. This stuff never really gets stomped out completely, but it is a racist ideology, but Scott is just kind of responding to what they believe. But they won't do that because racial hatred is largely a creation of the media and institutions of the elite. Do you remember when the Washington Post created a video tackling whiteness in America? How about when the Smithsonian created an infographic detailing whiteness and listed traits like being on time, being attracted to men with money, and being polite, respecting authority, or rational and linear thinking? The game appears to be that we should associate these positive traits with whiteness so that if black people don't have these traits, we can excuse them and blame them with the expectation on colonization. And if black people do possess these positive traits, you can't dismiss the premise of it being silly. They're simply infected with whiteness. It was one of the most racist documents I'd ever seen, and it was produced by an African American history museum in our nation's capital. And that's an old video that I did. There's a lot of talk in the country about systemic racism, but the anti-racists aren't going to solve the problem. They're largely the ones making it worse. There is a concerted effort in this country to ruin Black Americans. This isn't anything new. Manning Johnson, a Black man who defected from communism, talked about in Color, Communism, and Common Sense back in 1958. We see an example of this when activists complain about the disproportionate disciplining of Black and brown children in schools without asking the question of whether or not they're disproportionately being disruptive. The ACLU supported eliminating a mandate in California to report certain criminal activity in schools, such as when an employee attacked, assaulted, or physically threatened by a pupil. The ACLU said students who make contact with law enforcement are more likely to end up in jail or prison, and their beef is that happens to marginalized groups disproportionately. Being in an inner city school surrounded by unruly classmates feels like you're stranded in the middle of the ocean with an anchor chain to your ankle. And if you're a Black child who succeeds in staying above water, you'll be accused of trying to act white. Who do these people think their virtue signaling is actually saving? Everyone knows strengthening the family unit, improving fatherless homes stats would solve many of the problems facing the Black community, yet organizations like Black Lives Matter made disrupting the Western prescribed nuclear family a priority. They even made it clear that trans women are larger focus of their organization than straight Black men. On their What We Believe page, BLM made sure they were inclusive and uplifting to everyone except a Black father. Our institutions don't want Black people to regain their sense of community and family because it builds agency. Royal Meeker worked under the Woodrow Wilson administration, and he thought it would be good if minimum wage led to unemployment and then led them to government assistance. Better that the state should support the inefficient wholly and prevent the multiplication of its breed than subsidize incompetence and unthrift, enabling them to bring forth more of their kind. Just remember that when people want more government money and to take care of people, government money comes with government strings attached. Meeker was a eugenicist, and he didn't want those who he looked down upon to be masters of their own destinies. Black Americans have legitimate reasons to have racial grievances. Unfortunately, they're continuously siding with the perpetrators and choosing virtue signaling over constructive solutions. Manning Johnson, for example, explained this was a strategy for communists, yet your loyalty to the Black community could never supersede the agendas of communism. On a side note, the founders of Black Lives Matter are described trained Marxists. Adams often makes comments to challenge people's thinking. Even though I don't follow him religiously, I followed him long enough to know there was an underlining purpose to his words. But I absolutely knew he was going to get canceled, and I said he needed to be prepared for that. In an interview after much backlash, Scott Adams explained his motivation. It certainly wasn't for money or for fame. He said, I discovered the price of free speech is really high, and there are only a few people willing to pay it. So I decided to pay it so I could extend the conversation to something that everybody needs to hear. Scott Adams keeps noting on Twitter that no one really disagrees with the opinion that got him canceled. I've certainly seen activists, woke schools, and companies advocate that for Black safe spaces. When Disney separates Black employees into affinity groups, they're called Wakanda. Forgot about that. Ben Shapiro pointed out that if you swap out Blacks with whites in Adams' rant, it would have gotten him a totally different reaction. He said, here by way of example, it is a direct quote from Adams, but racist switched. If nearly half of all whites are not okay with Black people, according to this poll, not according to me, according to the poll, that's a hate group. I don't want to have anything to do with them. And I would say, based on the current way things are going, the best advice I could give to Black people is to get the heck away from white people. Just get the bleep away, because there is no fixing this. So I agree. People probably would have responded differently if he was a Black person saying, you know, what Ben basically said. And how is what Scott Adams said more racist than the anti-white videos that are often produced? Scott Adams recently asked his audience what the first rule of persuasion is. Buried beneath the angry replies of trolls was the correct answer. Attention is influence. Now that Adams has everyone's attention, let's see if we can fix the racial issues or genuinely talk about whether those who profess to fight racism have any intention of ending it. So, yeah, and I wonder how long this may be too long of a video to watch, but yeah, I have some videos and stuff you can watch with crazy stuff people were saying back in the day to reiterate the points that we have a hyper racialized society, and Scott Adams pointing out that it's wrong for people to not know that it's okay to be white is pretty insane. Um, Someone said people just like to redefine terms to fit whatever narrative they want to push. I don't know if that's about the other topic we're going to talk about or this, but I think people's reactions today to Scott, or the media's reactions to Scott, is pretty gross. Again, you don't have to agree with everything that Scott said, but you know, to just say headline. By the way, he's a racist, disgraced Dilbert creator who's a racist. He's dead. That's really messed up. So he did leave a note, a final message, and I'm going to have to read it from my computer because you can go to Scott Adams' page. Let me read it from my phone for you guys. But I just wish our media wasn't so messed up. And the author of this post from from People, which People has had some crazy headlines about different folks before, so I'm not terribly surprised. I'm not even really a little surprised. It's just gross. But she looks exactly like how you would expect her to look. So a final message from Scott Adams. If you are reading this, things did not go well for me. I have a few things to say before I go. My body failed before my brain. I am of sound mind as I write this, January 1st, 2026. If you wonder about any of my choices for my estate or anything else, please know I am free of any coercion and inappropriate influence of any sort, I promise. Next, many of my Christian friends have asked me to find Jesus before I go. I am not a believer, but I have to admit the risk reward calculation for doing so looks attractive. So here I go. I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and I look forward to spending an eternity with him. The part about me not being a believer should be quickly resolved if I wake up in heaven. I won't need any other convincing than that. I hope I am still qualified for entry. With your permission, I'd like to explain something about my life. For the first part of my life, I was focused on making myself a worthy husband and parent as a way to find meaning. That worked, but marriages don't always last forever, and mine eventually ended in a highly amicable way. I'm grateful for those years and for the people I came to call my family. Once the marriage unwound, I needed a new focus, a new meaning, and so I donated myself to the world, literally speaking with words out of my mouth, out loud in my otherwise silent home. From that point on, I looked for ways I could add the most to people's lives, one way or another. That marked the start of my evolution from Dilbert cartoonist to an author of what I hoped would be useful books. By then, I believed I had amassed enough life lessons that I could start passing them on. I continued making Dilbert comics, of course. As luck would have it, I'm a good writer. My first book in the useful genre was How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. That book turned out to be a huge success, often imitated and influencing a wide variety of people. I still hear every day how much that book changed lives. My plan to be useful was working. I followed up with my book Win Bigly that trained an army of citizens how to be more persuasive, which then correctly saw as a minor superpower. I saw that book change lives because I hear it often. You'll probably never know the impact that book had on the world, but I know, and it pleases me while giving me a sense of meaning that is impossible to describe. My next book, Loser Think, I tried to teach people how to think better, especially if they were displaying their thinking on social media. That one didn't put much of a dent in the universe, but I tried. Finally, my book, Reframe Your Brain, taught readers how to program their own thoughts to make their personal and professional lives better. I was surprised and delighted at how much positive impact that book is having. I also started podcasting a live show called Coffee with Scott Adams, dedicated to helping people think about the world and their lives in a more productive way. I didn't plan it this way, but it ended up helping lots of people find community that made them feel less lonely. Again, that had great meaning for me. I had an amazing life. I gave it everything I had. If you got any benefits from my work, I'm asking you to pay it forward as best you can. That is a legacy I want. Be useful. And please know I loved you all to the end, Scott Adams. So that's his final message to the world. A lot how he wanted to um, be useful and give back and help people as far as their way of thinking. Um, as far as um, his belief in Christianity, I like his idea that you do good, you're just a good person, you wake up in heaven, and then since you're like, oh, I'm in heaven, I'm convinced now, so I guess I am officially a believer. Uh, I wouldn't say that's how that works, but I guess I'll leave that him and Jesus, but I guess I'm not gonna not talk about it in generalities and maybe an example because I um feel that other people who haven't passed on should kind of know how it it works, but or how the what we know, I guess, in the Bible anyway, from how it works. But he did have a displayed a skewed sense of what it means to be a Christian, and um I guess it was a little surprising because a lot of people have a lot of opinions about different religions and particularly Christianity. You hear people talk about a lot people who are agnostic or militant atheists or people who deconstruct and then they start talking about it. It's like it doesn't sound like even the basics. Like there are things that people say that I'm like my nieces and nephews seem to kind of know more or at least about what's important. So anyway, prayers for his family and shame on the media. Shame on the media. Anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about what's going on at the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court is hearing a case about a ban on women's sports, and I've been very firm in my opinions when it comes to the transgender stuff. That's how a lot of people ended up finding me, even on TikTok, but especially on YouTube, because I had some videos, very viral videos, like in the millions about like Dylan Mulvaney. Um, and some of those got taken down on TikTok, and I was like, let me see how this might do on YouTube. Threw them up on YouTube, and I was like, oh, did very well, which I was kind of surprised. They let them go viral, um, but they did. And so a lot of people found me, and then a lot of feminists found me from that, and they didn't care too much for my abortion views, but I kept talking about them anyway. Um, but I've always been firm, and I know there's been people on the right who haven't been where I'm at with my position, and so I never believed in giving an inch with the particular topic. Um, I don't believe that if you say that you're a man, you say that you're a woman, but you're actually a man, that should grant you access to our locker rooms or our bathrooms or our sports teams and other things like that. And of course, there's different reasons why. One, of course, is a safety issue, um, security issue, privacy issue. You know, a lot of women don't even feel comfortable being in a locker room with other women, and you introduce a man in there, it's just not appropriate. I'm concerned about the type of men who would go into women's spaces even knowing that they're uncomfortable, even knowing that many said no. There are many men who are identifying as women who have some kind of sexual fetishes, like the Wachowski brothers who did The Matrix. They were watching like pornographic stuff, and got the saw freedom and liberty in that, and just eventually decided to transform, I suppose. But there's different folks who are attracted to their body being in the female form and wearing women's clothes, and they move into that particular category. There's a lot of people who are just dealing with I don't know, past sexual assaults, past sexual issues, past body issues spawned off from a bunch of different traumas that they have unresolved that lead them to different places. Or there's young women who want to associate with being a man really to protect themselves, and but in the end it doesn't really do that, and vice versa, even for men who want to feel protected, somehow hiding in the female form and then not being protected at all either. So there's a lot of confusion and heartbreak that you can have sympathy for. But one of the reasons why I didn't want to really move an inch on this is because the truth still matters. And I would say, like, you wanting me to call someone a woman who's not, you're asking me to lie, and that's wrong. It's immoral. I can't do that. It doesn't, how you feel doesn't change objective reality, and you're asking me to well, we can't bend it. It's always going to be true that this person is a man. So we can't change what is true. We can only make ourselves liars. We can only shield ourselves from it, close our eyes and pretend otherwise. And that's not the right thing to do. So when people will be like, well, why can't you just use their pronouns? Or why can't, because it's not real, because it's not true. And are you asking me to pity them? To throw out my morals and my convictions out of the window to have pity on someone? I don't think that's very respectful, because they're just respect them. I don't think it's respectful to to make me into a liar for the sake of their feelings. I think it shows pity, like, and I don't feel that that's right. I feel like um the most appropriate way to deal with people who are struggling with these kind of issues is to acknowledge the truth and try to help them deal with the world and live through the world. But if we have to change the whole entire society into their own special padded cell so they can't be harmed, that's not fair to us, that's not fair to them. And you saw so many people get militant about it. You'd see so many trans activists and supporters who would attack women. There was a Hershey's did some kind of um piece that was, or advertisement that focused on some trans people, and what the trans woman that they had and that they were featuring, like, in their ad, they had some crazy tweets, which I wrote about that too. But they had an idea that you should have to make women who reject them so uncomfortable in society that they fear talking about defying them at all. And even Dylan Mulvaney, even though he like smiled, he was like, well, you know what? One day I'm really, concerned about you, because one day, transphobia won't be tolerated. and we'll remember what you said online. Like that, I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist of it. I'm like, this person just threatened all of us. This person just threatened all of us. Like you better watch what you say, because we're gonna have the power one day. You're gonna be on the wrong side of history, and we're all gonna remember when you said that I wasn't a woman. So no, we can't just reject what is true. We have to let the truth be our guiding star, guiding light, or whatever you want to say. But that's been a thing that's been on my mind, on my heart for ever, I suppose, but just really last year, dealing with different stories and people pushing back against me on different things, like the Meyer story, debunking misinformation about someone they said was a kid who was um had autism, who got fired for eating food out the garbage. That wasn't true. He wasn't a kid, and he wasn't autistic based off of any reporting. I don't know if he is or what he is or isn't, but people were just saying that. No one presented any verifiable evidence of that being the case. And he wasn't just stealing food out the trash. He's stealing food from the sales floor that he just didn't want to pay for. And he was doing it over a long period of time. And once Meyer found out, which Meyer is a Michigan chain, it's in different parts of the country, which I think is mostly a Midwestern thing. But the Myers family, they're from Michigan. They live on like the west side of the state. Peter Meyer, he was a congressman for a little while, and he's one of the congressmen who voted to impeach Trump. So he didn't last too long after that. But I've met him. I don't know him, but I met him. I'm like, why would I want my local grocery store chain to be destroyed over misinformation? And people got angry with me. They're like, I bet you would be saying this if he was black. I'm like, what do you mean? Yes, I would. Like, it's just not true. And there was a lot of MAGA people and big MAGA accounts that were spreading the misinformation. So I'm always looking at some of these accounts with side eyes. And the New York Post was spreading misinformation about it. Our local newspapers in Michigan were spreading misinformation about it. Like, I'm contacting them, and they're like, okay, we had to change the story, do an editor's note and stuff, and corrections, because they just were going off of what somebody wrote on a GoFundMe and weren't really investigating it. And I'm like, these are people's lives, their livelihoods that you're messing with, where people are being harassed online because of misinformation. Like, what is true matters. And then people were pushing up against me, saying stuff like, well, we don't care. Myers is a big company, like, eat the rich. And how can you, like, why should he be fired over stealing little things? And I'm like, you can't steal from your employer. So anyway, I've just had like all these little battles about what is true, like in the past year or so, and not just the past year or so, but there's just particular stories that just really baffled me, like the Cracker Barrel story, where I said, hey, the name Cracker Barrel and the logo. If you don't know Cracker Barrel, it's like this old timey country restaurant. Most people know what Cracker Barrel is, but there's a man on the logo with a barrel, and it's called Cracker Barrel. And there are some people who believed that it was called Cracker Barrel because they were cracking the whip for like beating slaves. And I'm like, it's called Cracker Barrel because there's a literal barrel of crackers in the general stores. That's what they would store them in. And like, I've originally found out the information just I've gone to Cracker Barrel, not for a while, but we used to eat there. And people would play like checkers on the barrels and stuff. Like it looked like a general store, old country store and stuff. And but I eventually found out, like, oh, it's called Cracker Barrel because there are crackers in the barrels. I write historical fiction fantasy. So just in my research, I found that out. So I just shared the fact online and people were furious, furious, because they were convinced that it was something racist. And I'm like, no, what is true matters. Because you're pushing this crazy narrative to smear this company. Maybe there's a bunch of racists who work there. I don't know. But this particular thing, say, like, as if it's rooted in purposeful racism. It's just not true. It's just not true. And it's important to say what is true. I know some people say a lot of inflammatory, crazy things that they know are false for clicks and views. That's never been my thing. It's never been my thing. And if I'm just on here talking to a few people, which is the case right now, then that's just what it's gonna be. I'm not gonna just make stuff up to get people to watch. Because at the end of the day, saying what is true is important. And one of the if you ever heard Dennis Prager kind of lay out like what Judeo-Christian values are, and he has like 10 different things that tie, Christians and Jews and together, and which were the building blocks of like the West and stuff. And one of the things is like believing in objective reality. Because there's people who don't believe in like objective moral truths. So I think it's important to speak what is true. So when it comes to this transgender stuff, hearing people twist into pretzels to try to include men in women's sports is just absolutely insane. We all know innately that men are just bigger and stronger and faster than women. It brings me no pleasure to just kind of throw that out there. It's not anti-female to say so. It's just dealing with reality. And that's a reason why we have the different sex categories. If we had all men and women play together in sports, the teams would just be compiled of men, unless you did some kind of equity thing, making opportunities for women to be included. There's some situations where maybe you get a girl in or whatever, like or some females in. When it comes to like something like American Ninja Warrior, it's just you versus the obstacle course. So as long as you can get through the course, you're gonna get complete different stuff. But when it comes to different time limits, you're not gonna have a lot of women who can defeat a lot of the really good guys, because there's some really impressive females. And I haven't watched in a while, but it used to be my favorite sport thing, and I was obsessed with. Obsessed. But at first they started noticing how much notoriety that they were getting with women, and they started putting in categories of like the top female finishers. And I was just kind of like, just, it's supposed to be you versus a course. Like, why are you including like men and then the top female finishers? But I know they wanted like, I don't know, media from like, oh my gosh, a girl did it. Oh, it's so inspiring. But I'm also like, if you can't be like a regular finisher with all the other boys, it's trash. But then more women got involved who could like compete more, but still, your females aren't as good as the males, because the males are just built obviously differently. So just wanting them in because they say that they're women are really dumb. But I'm gonna play at least one clip, which we'll know more about how this case goes later. But there is the question about defining what a man and a woman is, and apparently the ACLU doesn't really have an answer for that. And I'm like, how are you going to argue that you can't exclude these particular people and you don't really have a definition for what is a woman, which we know Matt Walsh did a whole entire film on this topic, going around talking to people, interviewing people, including people who were professors and people who were in the field of doing the surgeries and all that other kind of stuff, who could not really define what a woman is. And we all know, like Ketanji Brown Jackson, who I think is a disgrace. Like, don't expect me to be all like, oh my gosh, there's a black woman on the Supreme Court, when she is too chicken to define what a woman is. I've no sense of pride in her whatsoever. None. Especially because a lot of the times she comes off as really dumb. But I didn't say not educated. She's very educated. But there's a lot of educated fools who allow themselves to be so filled with indoctrination that they're I don't know, pretty useless, I guess. She couldn't say what a woman was, and she still got on the Supreme Court. So now she's part of this decision, and she's saying some dumb stuff, but I'm at least going to play this portion of the lawyer being asked about, like, what is a woman.
Well, to pick up on the issue of discrimination on the basis of transgender status, let me go to some basics. Do you agree that a school may have separate teams for a category of students classified as boys and a category of students classified as girls?
Yes, Your Honor.
If it does that, then is it not necessary for there to be, for equal protection purposes, if that is challenged under the Equal Protection Clause, an understanding of what it means to be a boy or a girl, or a man or a woman?
Yes, Your Honor.
And what is that definition? For equal protection purposes, what does it mean to be a boy or a girl, or a man or a woman?
Sorry, I misunderstood your question. I think that the underlying enactment, whatever it was, the policy, the law, we'd have to have an understanding of how the state or the government was just understanding that term to figure out whether or not someone was excluded. We do not have a definition for the court, and we don't take issue with we're not disputing the definition here. What we're saying is that the way it applies in practice is to exclude birth sex males categorically from women's teams, and that there's a subset of those birth sex males where it doesn't make sense to do so according to the state's own interest.
Well, how can a court determine whether there's discrimination on the basis of sex without knowing what sex means for equal protection purposes?
I think here we just know that we basically know that that they've identified, pursuant to their own statute, Lindsay qualifies as a birth sex male, and she's being excluded categorically from the women's teams as the statute. So we're taking the statute's definitions as we find them, and we don't dispute them. We're just trying to figure out, do they create an equal protection problem?
Yeah. So obviously the answer is going to be no. There's that you're not discriminated against. and they're not going to be protected under the 14th Amendment, but it's so silly. You have an opportunity to play with men. You can still call yourself a woman. It won't be true. But you shouldn't make other people have to pretend like you're a woman. If that's how you want to live and that's how you want to lie, I suppose it's your business. It's wrong. I'm not going to play along. I'm going to correct you. But if that's how you choose to live your life, that's how you have the liberty to live your life. But you don't have the right to force everyone to comply with you and to play on the women's team. You can play on the men's team. And if taking hormones, I think you should probably be disqualified at that point anyway. But if you're taking them and estrogen makes you less fast, less strong, and you can't play with the men and qualify on that team anymore, those are decisions that you made, and those are decisions that you have to live with. And this conversation and this issue is really so fascinating because it I think it really determines a lot about individuals. Like, are you willing to just throw out objective truth? Are you willing to lie? Especially just to appease people who are unwell. Where are your convictions? Where are you willing to stand? Can you recognize what is fair and what isn't fair? And are you willing to still treat women unfairly for your narrative? Because it is unfair, obviously, to women. But a lot of people don't care. And why should women be the one who have to lose in this situation is the question. Oh, it's just a small number of the population, so they can get over it. Why make so many women have to comply? That's what doesn't make sense. You're just picking on the small population. This small population can get over it. Making all the other women in the world have to deal with it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Be honest with people when they start having these inclinations. You can do whatever you want to do to your body to some degree. But you're going to have to, it doesn't matter how much you doll yourself up, you're still not allowed in the women's bathroom. And if that causes you some, just know the danger you may putting yourself in. It's not wise. But you do not have the right to impose your will like that on the rest of women, because you're not one. And you can make that choice. You can make that choice. And what's interesting is in different accounts, like when they're talking to the lawyers, they're like, okay, well, what if there's a boy who doesn't take hormones and who just says that they're a woman? And what about them? Do they get to play? And they're like, no, the state can, say they can't play. So they want this subset of men to have these special privileges if they are taking the hormones and stuff. That's how you want to separate them, not just by they don't want to have to admit that it's dumb if people just identify that they're a woman, because that's what they've been arguing for years now. And that's an issue and a problem that the trans community have had. And they didn't gatekeep their stuff and say, no, you actually have to do this X, Y, and Z. You have to be diagnosed, like properly diagnosed, and have gone through this for years, so people actually know that this is an issue, and it's not some kind of weird fetish, and it's not you just trying to get out of the male prison, and it's not just you trying to, win a couple of matches here or there, and that you've done the work. They just allowed all these people to come in and just self-identify. And maybe they put on a dress or whatever. Maybe they just want to grow up their hair long. Maybe they just want to be non-binary because they don't want to commit. They allowed, which was a mental illness, to become a fad, and the whole community really has to pay for it. We talk about the need of gatekeeping. Sometimes they should have kept this. And it's really affected the whole LGBT community, because they just see it as a crazy outgrowth. There's plenty of gay people who are like, nah, that's gone too far. There's plenty of people that are just like, I'm just kind of sick of all this. And you see a lot of sentiments about even gay marriage changing. Or maybe they didn't really change that much. People are just more vocal about, you know what, I didn't actually like it the whole time. So there's consequences to this stuff. And I don't know why they wanted to bring this all the way up to the conservative Supreme Court right now. But I don't think it's going to go well for them. Anyway, someone said, Yes, white men in dresses apparently get special privileges. Yeah, I maybe that's just a part of it too, that some people want to be special. Um, like they want to be people want to be victims, but they want to be special at the same time, and the trans stuff is a good way to fit into those categories. If you're just a cis white woman, no one cares about your white tears. But if you are a trans woman, you got to come first, and they'll put them over black women and all kinds of different stuff. Like their hierarchy is really crazy. Anyway, we'll see how that case goes. That's all I got for you guys today. Please go back to news.com, check out different content, website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do, please consider leaving a donation on the website because it just costs to stream, run my site, all that, so you guys can support members. To appreciate it and appreciate you guys. You guys can also check out well, that's an old shirt. Shirts from the website and mugs and so on, so you guys can check that stuff out. You guys can also check out different books that I have available on Amazon. I have 19 right now, so you guys can go ahead and check those out. There's a link in the description. It'll take you to my book website where you guys can check out Bigger, which is my children's picture book about a baby dinosaur who wants to be bigger. So I encourage you guys to check that out and get that. It's a really, really, really cool book. And I do have some signed copies. So if you guys want to pick some of those up, you guys can. So anyway, God bless you guys. And I will see you tomorrow. If reminder, something could come up where I'm kind of delayed and stuff. So I'll try to keep you guys updated. But we should be able to have a show tomorrow and it'd be fine. God bless you guys. And I'll see you tomorrow.